Put me in there for a minute.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jenna Trentadue. I'm the State Initiatives Grant Coordinator, and I'm going to be holding the meeting today. I'm going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to jump in case anybody's late. But I wanted to let everybody know that I am currently recording this session. It will be available at a later time on the Small Forest Land Grant website. And please be cognizant of making sure your mics are muted when you're not speaking, and we'll get started here in just a minute. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. There's still a few kind of people joining us and jumping in. For those who just joined in, just a heads up, we are recording this session and it will be made available at a later date on the website for others to watch in case they were not able to join us this morning. So thank you guys all for being interested in the Small Forest Land Grant Program. I want to go ahead and start with just showing you guys, if you did not attend the previous one, and we have an external website. Let me get this up. So this is our external website. If you just Google in the Small Forest Land Grant Program for Oregon Department of Forestry, it'll bring you to this page. If you haven't already watched it, please check out this meeting video that I did at a previous date. This will give you a full rundown of how to walk through the application. So if you missed that, I definitely encourage you to check that out. This particular meeting is going to be a little bit more informal. I won't be walking through all of the pieces of the application since I already did that on the previous video. This is sort of a follow-up opportunity. I wanted to address some of the questions I've got in case those are questions that you guys are having as well. And also just to kind of have an open forum for you guys to ask questions. It's sometimes a great way to get answers to your questions when somebody else is asking them. So I don't have to talk to each one of you independently. Not that I don't mind doing that. And another point I want to make is a lot of you have utilized my Book It feature at the bottom of my email address. So I definitely encourage any of you who need to have kind of a one-on-one conversation with me about your particulars of your grant application to please reach out in that way. It ties directly into my calendar. And so that way you can set some time apart to have a conversation with me before this comes up due. And all of the applications will be closing on November 24th, and that will end at midnight. And so you have up until then to get your application in. One question that sometimes people ask is if they turned it in and they need to make changes, can they do so? We do allow that. I would, highly suggest being as far along as you can, and don't, try not to do that because it is a difficult process sometimes for us to delete it out and kind of have you resubmit. But if you need to and you accidentally hit the submit button and you realize, oh my gosh, I left this whole piece out, I didn't copy and paste this part, we can assist you with that and just reach out to me directly and we can do that. So there's still a few of you guys kind of rolling in here. I'm just going to address one more time that this is recorded and it will be available at a later date on the external website or as soon as I can get it up there. So as you guys can see, we have all the information is still available on here. We've got the application instructions, the application itself. Request for proposals has a great amount of information in it. So please check that out if you still are just getting started with this and you haven't, been to the previous video. And then we have a draft agreement template. This is the type of template we're going to be using if you get the funding and just kind of understanding some of the expectations you might need to have around how you're going to get your application done. What are the legal requirements to setting something like that up? So definitely check all of those pieces out. We also added in the summary of awards from our previous biennium for the Small Forest Land Grant. Go check those out. These are projects that we did in the last couple of years, and sometimes it'll give you a good idea of the type of work that would be acceptable or even kind of successful with this type of grant funding. So I definitely encourage you guys to go check that out, and you can click on this little part down here, summary of awards. So some of the questions that have come up, one thing I just wanted to point out when I did the video previously is that I don't think that I mentioned this, but I wanted to just bring it up again, is that in the instructions, and you can click on that link, I already did. These are the priority planning areas that I'm referencing in the application. You do have to come to the instructions in order to click on the links. I do not have the links in the application itself. So I've had some questions around where do I find our priority planning areas? Just make sure you're looking in the instructions page. That's where I have these at. And if you are in any of these, then that's applicable and you want to just select that on the application. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that since there's a lot of different documents to be looking at. I know it's hard to navigate some of these things. So just some of the questions I wanted to address here is there's been a lot of questions around leverage. So if you have questions about leverage, we're going to cover that first. So with the leverage, there's been some questions around like, what if you're doing the work yourself? What are you going to use for what that financially could translate to? So at ODF, we have a landowner labor rates and kind of like use of equipment rates that kind of have rates associated to it. And I'm happy to provide any of that to you guys if you're specifically trying to kind of look at volunteer hours or doing some of the work yourself or that type of thing to offer up as leverage. That's a way we can do it. The other way is that Firewise communities, through the Firewise program, there's identified volunteer hour costs around like what your volunteer time would be considered for Firewise. You're welcome to use that as well. Those are two pretty established ways that we would identify a cost for leverage type of work if you're doing some of that work yourself. So those are resources available to you. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. And I'm going to just finish up my leverage conversation and then I'll call on you, Kathy. So leverage is not added to your total on the application. Just a heads up, it is a separate financial piece. So when you do your totals of your budget and stuff, it'll add up all the categories, but leverage is not included in that total. Leverage is its own kind of like portion of that. So that's going to come up separately. That's another question that I got asked. Leverage is not required. There's not a minimum on it. There's not a maximum on it. However, you'll get an additional point for having it. And it adds to the grant. You're saying basically, what am I going to do? Or what is this other piece going to do to help bring more to the grant application that we're not asking for funding for. We're saying we're going to do this regardless of not getting funded for that part of it. So it's just kind of a way to show you're willing to do some sort of investment in another space to kind of make it bigger and better. Go ahead, Kathy. You got your hand up. Oh, I think you're muted there. Thank you, Laura. I will do that here in just a minute. Kathy, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can do it for you.
Okay, I'm good.
You got it. Great. Go ahead. No problem.
Okay, thanks, Jenna.
Sure.
Just curious, you gave 2 sites for the labor rate. Could you please repeat those, where to find the labor rate?
Yeah, great question. Apologies about that. I kind of ran through it quickly. So I'm going to pop the landowner labor rates that we use at ODF into the chat as per, I think Laura requested that just a minute ago. So I'll go ahead and put that in there for you guys to access. And you can, if you miss it somehow or you're watching this in a recording, just email me and I'll send it to you. And then the other one is the Firewise labor rates. And I believe that you can find those on the Firewise website. And that's just something that generally Firewise communities use when they're identifying how much they've put into their contributions around their place. So it's kind of specific to the Firewise program. But if you are having questions about, like, maybe there's some additional maybe there's some additional place that you found like a labor rate and you're asking if that's applicable, just reach out to me. There's some other places that you can essentially get that information. And if it's a viable source, then I'll probably okay it. So good question. So it's the Firewise, and then it's the labor rates that we provide from ODF. And Nathan, go ahead and ask your question while I grab this.
Yeah, I had a question about the critical infrastructure and how close that should be located to the project area. Like, what's the radius to count critical infrastructure as being located close to the project or would be affected by the project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So how close is critical infrastructure? We don't have an exact amount identified in the application, which is why you're asking the question. I think that with critical infrastructure, I mean, I would say anywhere between like a half a mile to a mile would be the max I would say is recognizable as being tied to the grant itself. And you kind of have to make a good case if it's going to be that far away. But maybe you could, as far as like embers and stuff go, sometimes miles. So I think it's more about how you write it up, but I'd say no more than a mile would be probably reasonable, unless we're talking about something like, like a potable water source for an entire community. And that's not like right adjacent to it, but it's close enough that it's sort of still recognizable as far as like how critical infrastructure might be impacted. So yeah, good question. Think about reasonableness is maybe my point. We don't want to go too far out or else it starts to become unreasonable to have it tied to the grant anymore. So I wouldn't say more than like a mile. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to pop this landowner labor rates into the chat real quick for everybody while we were talking about it. Nathan, you still have your hand up. Did you have another question about it?
I actually have a couple more questions. I don't want to monopolize, but
okay. Let's hold for just a minute. Let me walk through a few things that I've gotten here, and then as they sort of come up, maybe we can do it in tandem with some of the other pieces so that we're kind of covering it by subject. And then if we don't get to it, we'll kind of open it up at the end. So apologize. For some reason, it's not letting me add it into the chat. I'll follow up at the end here. Or actually, you know what I'll do? Because it's not letting me add anything into the chat right now. I'll put the landowner labor rates on the external website for you guys to pull as an additional link so you can grab it off of there, and that way others can use it as well if they're not in here. Apologies about that. Teams is not being friendly to me today. Okay, so let me just run through a few more things, and then kind of as things come up, let's talk about it. And anybody else have a question around leverage? Oh, thank you. So Suzanne put in there, Firewise volunteer labor rate right now is $33.49 per hour. So you guys don't even need to go to the website. She's got it for us. Thank you, Suzanne. And then would complementary work by partners be eligible to list as leverage? The leverage projects need to be adjacent to or within this SFG project boundary is a question from Ben. Good question, Ben. Yeah, that would be eligible as far as partners that are doing complementary work adjacent to the project. If there's, especially if there's like, it has to be sort of collaborative though. It's something sort of you are collaborating with them. And the reason why you're doing it there is because they're bringing that and you're bringing this. If it's just work that they did independently, it had nothing to do with you and you're not actually collaborating on it, I wouldn't consider that to be leverage. That's just previously planned projects that got done in the area. Also, the leverage has to be during the time frame of the grant application is open. And so if you're not doing something at that point in time, if it's something that was already done, that's not going to be leverage at this point. And yeah, make sure, go ahead, you guys, and put questions in the chat if you need to too, and I'll try and cover them as we go along. How is leverage reported during the grant? Good question, Christina. So when I send out reporting, once we have the agreement set up and you've gotten funded, let me put it in just back there, is that there's like a report that I request information from you, and part of that would be identifying what leverage you've completed. And we base it off of, like, when we put the grant agreement together, we'll be identifying deliverables that are associated to your leverage costs as well. To just kind of like have a pre-defined, what is the intent of your leverage? What is that going to be? What are you looking at? We'll go along with our scope of work. And then as we do the reporting, we'll be checking to see like how far along are you on that piece too? Because it's all reportable at the end when we do our final reports and our summaries, identifying where leverage was concluded to give a fuller picture to our legislature and to others as far as like how much we actually did for this grant. And also not just what we did with the money, but how did we build off of that? And that's the leverage piece. Okay, and then let me just see if this last one was. Okay, Nathan's asking about social benefit. We're gonna hold on that for just a second. The other piece I wanted to cover was budget stuff, the actual budget itself, not just the leverage piece. I've gotten some questions around like, how do we guesstimate how much this is going to cost? Please do not guess in your application. Definitely talk to a contractor, see if you can get some bids, get even an idea. You could talk to a contractor and say, you know, tentatively, this is what I'm trying to do, about how much would that cost? Please don't just be guessing yourself, because if we get you funded and it's significantly off, we're not able to give you more money. You're not able to meet the deliverables. There's kind of consequences to all of that. So just please make sure that you're doing your due diligence to look up this stuff ahead of time and try to talk to somebody who's actually done this type of work. Even ODF might be a useful resource, or a fire department or something if they've done other mitigation work in the area or have worked with the contractors. So it's just always good to get some actual solid information when you're putting together your budget. I really would encourage you not to be guessing. And then think about inflation rates as well. If you can't get this work done until next year, there can be a significant increase in inflation as far as like the gas prices for those contractors, or even just in the work itself. So maybe having a candid conversation with a contractor as around like, how much might that be? How can we build that into our grant? And get an idea from them. They generally know sort of some of that flux, but we're not, if there's a significant increase and we've only accounted for so much money, we're not going to potentially be able to give you any additional to cover that increase in inflation. So build it into your grant ahead of time if you can. And then let's see here. Let me mention a couple of things in the grant. Okay, so let's talk about the social benefits needed to be tied to the project. Does there need to be documentation that shows a direct financial benefit to a particular community, or can it be inferred? How closely does a social benefit need to be tied to the project? It needs to be directly tied to the project, Nathan. It needs to be that this work is directly affecting some sort of socially vulnerable type of, you want to clarify? Go ahead, Nathan.
I guess one of the things I'm saying here is reducing wildfire risk could result in lower homeowners insurance rates and keep people from losing their homeowners insurance, which benefits lower income people more than higher income people. But I'm not going to go around to all 15,000 residents and ask them whether they've been contacted by their insurance company or not. So that's what I'm saying. There is a causal relationship there, but I don't have a document that shows this. By doing this work, 3% of the residents will be able to retain their homeowners insurance that would have otherwise lost them or something like that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, like this kind of overarching ideas around how it minimizes impacts to communities. I think that you could definitely put that in your grant, but that's not really the crux of what this question is sort of intended to get to, which is what are the socially vulnerable, or how are there benefits to socially or economically vulnerable populations within the grant area that you're working on. And the documents would be like demographics of that area or some sort of social vulnerability index from a map that identifies that there's specific need in that area that addresses like a social or economically vulnerable population. So I think you're a little bit high level on that, though I appreciate the outside of the box thinking, and I think it's worth putting into the grant if you think it's easy to tie that. But I don't think you're going to be able to create any kind of like real document that's going to help you justify that you're somehow, I think that's true for any community, I guess is my point. Go ahead, Nathan, you need to clarify that some more.
I guess the particular community I work in, the demographics, basically the census data contradicts itself. On the economic and climate social justice tool, it says we're not vulnerable, but on the rural community justice tool, it says we are. And then you go to certain county level stuff and it says we are or we aren't depending on the day. So for my particular community, the census data is very light and sometimes contradictory.
I think that's true of a lot of the pieces of these type of projects. So of course, if you're writing an application, please choose what benefits you the most as far as getting the funding. I'm not going to be doing any kind of research as far as other than just checking to verify that whatever documentation that you put into the application is supporting your, your information in the application. I'm not going to go out and try and find where there's contradictory information around that. I'm just going to verify that the information that you did provide is an adequate source and not something just made up. So I think you can always find contradictory information. So definitely lean into where you do have the support for what you're trying to do. Does that answer what you're asking? And we can talk offline if you got more specifics and you want to really.
No, that makes sense to me.
Okay. Lori, you got something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, thank you. That's a great question, Nathan. I was going to say we could talk more about this offline. And also one thing just for everyone to keep in mind is that you are competing with other projects. So the best, strongest way you can demonstrate a need and a deliverable is going to give you your best bet because your application is going to be scored, right? So think of that of like, what is the clearest demonstratable results that I can put in this application for the scoring committee to rank. And then to Jenna's point, we can definitely talk more offline about what those things look like. So thank you.
Thanks, Lori. I appreciate that add-on. Also, the other question here from you was can the non-traditional forest products be aspirational, and do there need to be contracts in place before the project begins? I think that they could be aspirational. I don't expect you guys to have all of this nailed down ahead of time, but I do want you to be doing something that's reasonable or something that you think actually could get completed in the grant. So you may not have contracts in place, but maybe you've already had some conversations with others about this and think it's a feasible thing to have for the grant. In that case, then I think it would be reasonable to add that into the grant. But I'm not expecting you guys to have all of this set in place within a 2-week time, or sorry, a 2-month time period of an RFP where you're trying to get this all pulled together. But it does need to be reasonable, especially if it's something you've done previously, in which case then maybe that's a reason to actually add in that, like, hey, we've done this before, we know we can do it again too. So that would be really helpful. Do photos help or not? Photos are not, you can't turn in photos in the application. Photos will be used if you get funded. We'll be utilizing photos as a way to kind of do like a before and after for the projects. So photos will be useful at that point in time. But as far as the application goes, we are going to have a lot of them. I have a scoring committee that's going to be scoring these, and it takes a lot of time to review grants. So I really am keeping these as simple as possible. Another question that came up was letters of recommendation. Are we accepting those? And no, we are not. Again, same thing. I am keeping these applications as simple as possible for the scoring process and the ability for us to get through all of these applications and fund them within a reasonable amount of time that you guys can actually get this work done before the biennium ends. So I apologize that those are not opportunities, but we just really don't have time to look through photos and letters of recommendation and all this kind of stuff to go with these applications. I apologize, but that's just not feasible. And as Lori mentioned, we do the photos. It's just that once you get funded and as like a before and after piece, not for the application process, just to clarify. So let's see here. A couple other things. Capital improvement projects are not allowable expense. This includes building roads and grading roads and stuff. At this point in time, we did not include that as part of this. This is mitigation specific work. Even though I do understand this can increase and help ingress, egress, or even allow you to get to certain areas that maybe you couldn't have for this particular grant, that is not something we are allowing. If you have an HOA, likely I will approve you as a sponsor because that questions come up a lot. You don't necessarily have to be a 501c3, but I do require that you still reach out to me to get the approval. I just need to kind of verify that it's going to be working with the financial space that we would be working in if you got the grant funding. So please still reach out, but most likely you would probably get approved. If you're looking for contractors, if you're having a hard time finding contractors, please reach out to your local ODF office. We generally keep a list of contractors in our ODF offices that have been, identified for your areas. And also, I recently was given the information that our Associated Oregon Loggers is another great resource for reaching out to identify if you don't have the resources for finding like contractors in your area or contractors are very low availability. You can definitely try that route as well to see if they have some lists of contractors who could maybe come over to your area to do some of this work. So those are things that I've ran into. Does this support Fireways communities? Yes, though it doesn't have to be a Fireways community and it doesn't even have to support Fireways communities, but it can and it can't. It's for anything. I know in the first biennium, we had a specific pot of money that was specifically for Fireways. That has changed over the bienniums. And now, yes, you can still apply as a Fireways community, not required, and it's not required to support them necessarily either. So any of those things work. The map on the application is not intended for significant detail. Draw a circle and call it good. A lot of people have reached out about their frustration around drawing on the map. I understand this is Survey 123. We are not looking for perfection. We are just looking for where is the grant potentially going to be at. When we get into the space where I'm funding some of these applications, then we're going to be having a lot more conversations about grant or maps and GIS and some of the details and what the treatments might be and so on and so forth. But in this phase, please just do a circle if you need to, whatever it may be. Just make sure you're identifying generally where the area is so we have a good idea of what we're looking at. Let's see here. I'm going to go back to the chat here and just add a couple of things. What if we are working in concert with another party for multiple owners as far as budget? What if we're working in concert with other party? Budget estimates have to include everybody involved in the grant application is what I think you're asking. So yeah, if there's other parties included, you need to be, and you're applying together, then of course the budget needs to take into account everybody and everything. If you want to disseminate in the budget narrative how much is going to go to each piece, you can definitely do that. But it just depends on how you want to set that up. Just make sure you're very clear around what the intent is or how maybe these different entities are working together to get this grant done. I mean, so maybe it's different communities working together. Maybe if it's different landowners, maybe it's a sponsor and yourself and a few other landowners. Just make sure you're just being very clear in the application on how exactly that's working. But definitely in the budget, you need to include everything that you are looking for to be funded out of the budget, or you won't get funded for it. And if I didn't completely answer that, Richard, please feel free to expand on it. But I think that's how I'm reading it. How much grant money is available? It's a good question. Is it distributed on a money per acre basis? And is that private property needing fire fuels mitigation? So Lori identified that the requested fundings for between 10,000 to 300,000. I think the question could be maybe identifying how much total funding there is. It's about 2.5 million that was identified for this program. And so, depending on what applications we get, how much they're asking for, I can fund a whole lot of applications if they're all $10,000, but if they're all $300,000, it's going to be significantly less. So, just kind of keeping that in mind, but 2.5 million is the full budget for this program at this time. And Lori also mentioned some other pieces in there about project eligibility, so check that out, but it's also available on the application instructions and the application itself as well. And then Laura's asking if we're applying as a soil and water conservation district, sorry, acronyms, are we considered the sponsor? Yeah, okay. If you are somebody who generally would be considered a sponsor, but you're not actually sponsoring anybody, then you're just the applicant, and that's perfectly fine. A sponsor is when another like a group, like a community or something, needs somebody to help them with the administrative space potentially, or maybe some of the financial space potentially, and they would like to add you onto their application, then you become the sponsor for that community. But that's not necessarily your application. You are just sponsoring them, and we'll work together on how exactly that plays out on the back end. But essentially what it is that there's an applicant and a sponsor if you're kind of supporting them. If you're just going in on it and you're wanting to take on full responsibility and you're doing all of that, you just apply as the applicant. So you can do either way. I know it gets a little tricky in there. If you want to kind of go through the nuances of how exactly, depending on how you're going to set this up, please feel free to connect with me offline. And, oh, sorry. Somebody was asking if this is a list of contractors on ODF. It is not on our website. The list of contractors are available at the district offices for ODF. So you can go to our external website and find your local district office and then give them a call. They generally just keep it at the front desk. It's not something we post online. And it's not even like, we don't have any recommendations. We have to stay very neutral in this space. So any contractor that's working in the areas of those districts can put their name on those lists. So you have to still do your due diligence to find one that would work well for you. So I'm just saying that because I've seen people come in thinking these are ODF recommended contractors. No, this is a list of contractors that are available in the area where people can utilize their services. So yeah, it's not on the website, but our district office information is on the website. Oh, sorry, Lori already got to that one. I'm already jumping. Oh, sorry, I'm like reading them through. Lori, you're getting on it before me here. Oh, so Richard said they're not applying together. So if you are not applying together, then each grant is its own individual application. Okay, so even if you're like 4 landowners and you're in the same area and doing all this kind of stuff, you can mention that maybe your landowners are applying to the grant. So there is opportunity, but they may not get funded. So that's not really going to make a big difference. If you are applying, it's just your budget, it's your work, it's your property. Whether or not your neighbors are applying or not, or your other communities applying or not, is a completely separate thing. The only reason that you're including them in it is if you're all going in together, you're pooling your financial piece, you're pooling your work, all that kind of stuff. So again, we can go a little bit more offline if you have a specific situation that you need more answers for, but if you are not going to be for sure going in with them financially, then you're keeping those completely separate. So Elizabeth was asking about the eligibility piece. So no, those are not about acreages that are the 160 acres and 640 acres are not about they're not about eligibility. They are about eligibility. Sorry, let me rephrase that. This is about how much acreage you can own in order to apply for the grant that meets the definition of a small forest landowner. You cannot own more than those amounts. It's not about how much acres you're treating. It's about how much acres you own as a small forest landowner that can benefit from the grant program. If you own more than those things, 160 acres or 640 acres, depending on where you're at in the state, then you are not eligible as a small forest landowner in this particular grant. This is language that's written into law. I cannot change that. That is specifically identified by the legislature and one of the main eligibility requirements for this grant. So spend some time on the application itself or in the application instructions of the request for proposals. I have all the identified language in there. Now, one thing I just want to clarify here is that it is owned acreage is how we are utilizing it for this grant. We do not have enough GIS or resources to just go through and identify just the forest land portion of your grant applications or like what you own. So right now it's just owned land. I know that's frustrating for some because not everybody has forest land. Some of you have range land, some of you other stuff. But because of our resources for this grant, we're just going with owned land because that's the easiest way. We just don't have enough GIS information to kind of break down each and every application to identify, is this really just the forest land that they own or not? So at this point in time, just want to make that clear because that question has come up quite a bit. Okay, so I think I got through the chat so far. So feel free to keep popping those in there if you need to. A couple of other things that have come up that might be helpful. Sorry, I'm looking over to my other screen to look at the questions that have come up. So equipment needs to be very specifically fuels mitigation focused. I cannot approve trucks, tractors, or ATVs, but I can approve things like skid steer mulcher or brush hog, something that's very specifically fuels mitigation focused. Those other things can be utilized in so many different ways that we are not supporting that per se in the grant. You can get an attachment to a tractor, perhaps, but not as long as it specifically fuels mitigation stuff. But it's not, we're definitely staying away from fire suppression and or just kind of like general, you know, equipment that's just not, you can't specifically tie that, you know, we're not going to support you buying a truck and then you can use that for however long kind of thing. And we do want to give you the benefit of the doubt, but however, when we're dealing with state dollars, we have to be very careful around these type of things. Kathy, you got a question.
Okay, trying to get unmuted. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Again, I don't want to dominate.
Okay,
One of our questions, this is really specific to our application. We have 3 HOAs going together to apply for this award. One of the HOAs is a gated community, and both gates need to have emergency devices put on them so the fire department can open the gates. Would that qualify as critical infrastructure?
What is it that you have to buy for the gates? Like a security pad type of thing?
Pam, can you help me with this? Pam's on the call.
Yeah, yes. It's more that the fire trucks getting into it when they need to. There's no knockbox on it at this point. The gates are old. They're like 30 years old, this particular gate. When the power goes out, the gates don't open. So we're needing to upgrade the gate. And I don't know if that's under a capital improvement that's disqualified.
Yeah, we were wondering if we don't have a bid yet, but I think we're working on it. And would that qualify to put devices on? We have 2 entry gates. We had a small fire this summer, and the fire trucks arrived and couldn't get in, and just by happenstance, one of our homeowners was outside and ran to get her gate key and unlock the gate, but it could have been really serious.
Yeah, thank you guys for the question. I think I have to ponder this a little bit offline with you. The reason why is because you're crossing the line into response rather than mitigation. And I want to look back at the language around the ORS for this particular grant to see if we might be touching into a space that it's not supporting mitigation as much as it's supporting fire response. I don't know that I would consider it capital improvement, but that's also sort of dancing the line as well. So let me circle back with you on that. If others have questions about their specific situation or similar, please reach out to me too. But I think in this forum, I need to spend some time looking at that a little closer. So thank you for the question. I will definitely come back. And if you could shoot me an email just so I don't lose your name and information, and we'll follow up together and talk about it a little bit more.
Thank
so
you.
We do need to be careful that this is not about fire response. It really has to be focused on mitigation. I actually almost feel like I'd be more supportive of it if it was like access to gates to get through for the contractors to do mitigation work or something, just because that's more focused on what this grant is supposed to intend to do. But yeah, let's talk a little more offline. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Jenna.
Yeah. And if others have similar questions, reach out to me independently and we'll kind of work through if it's hitting the mark with the intent of the funding. I just want to be very cognizant of what the legislature intended us to do with this money. Not that those aren't very important pieces, because I do agree with you. That's why it's a little bit hard to answer that. Did you have another question, Kathy, or you just still got your hand up?
Oh, sorry. Yes,
Oh,
I
go ahead.
do,
You had a
but,
couple of them.
once
Go ahead.
again, I hate to
Please go ahead.
dominate.
You're fine.
Okay. So we were wondering, we were looking through the previous awards from 2023 to 25, and one of them, Cheryl, could you come on and explain about the replanting?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Jenna, you have me? So our question is, when we were looking at some of the awards that were granted, we saw that replanting with native species, that some of the grant was allowed for that. And we're curious if that's the case with this grant, if replanting can be included once we create the defensible space and remove plants that are flammable. Can we do that? And do they all, my second part of the question is, do they all need to be native plants, or can they follow Oregon State's guidelines about fire resistant plantings? And can that be used as a guideline?
Yeah, good question. So I think we stipulated in the grant that it needs to be 75% mitigation type of work. I think that you can tie in replanting to mitigation because it's about resilience and it's about maintaining, it's lowering fire risk on the landscape. So you could make a case for it. I would say I wouldn't make that the focus of your application because that's not truly the intent of this, to do any kind of reforestation or kind of that stuff. But I think we're looking at a whole system. And so when you're taking out invasives or you're taking out high fire, risky kind of plants or species, then reintroducing something that's native and or fire resistant, depending on the reasoning behind it, is appropriate to some extent. So I would definitely say it could be part of your application, but again, it's not necessarily the focus of it. So you may not score super well if you're going to spend too much on that space. But I think actually in some ways you could really make the case for maintenance into the future. How are you maintaining a healthy landscape that's going to be more resilient to wildfire, or how it's going to be less risk of wildfire because of, restoring the ecosystem in that area and or supporting the significant, we're dealing with drought in a lot of areas. So sometimes I think that's a big piece to kind of talk about, is how you're going to be managing the resources of the water tables in these areas by utilizing plants or trees that are going to have less competition, or how you're going to set things up to help. There's been studies done on clumping, how you can clump trees to be more resilient to wildfire events and such. So please use whatever science you can to identify how that's going to support reducing risk into the future. But great question. So it can be a piece of this for sure. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks.
That's a good one. I hadn't even thought of that question yet. Kathy, did you have any more, or did that cover it? You're good. Okay.
I'm good.
And Nathan, you had some. Did we cover all of yours, or I apologize? Please go ahead and feel free to jump in now. I just wanted to cover a couple of things before we got to this part.
No, I think I'm pretty good. Yeah, just trying to figure out what exactly critical infrastructure is. I guess that other part for me, like I can understand substations and things, but like would a fire station be considered critical infrastructure? Would like is irrigation infrastructure that can be used by fire departments during a emergency event, would that be considered critical infrastructure? Like how wide can this definition go?
Yeah, good question. I would stay a little bit away from the response side of things, but I think that definitely like water that's going to be supporting a community would definitely be considered critical infrastructure. If there's even power lines that are like, if you took out these power lines, that it was essentially going to destroy the ability for the community, you know, after a wildfire or something, to be able to have any kind of power out there, and that's significantly going to affect something that would be considered critical infrastructure. So schools, you know, hospitals, those type of things are all, and we can kind of get into the nitty gritty. I try not to put too much. If I list out what I think is critical infrastructure, I'm going to miss half of what there is. And so then that's going to limit you. So I'm not trying to be evasive about it. I'm just trying to give you the opportunity to make a case of why it's critical infrastructure to some extent, rather than me just giving you a box that you have to live in when it comes to that. So if you want to bounce some more ideas off of me, please feel free. Any of you around critical infrastructure, I definitely feel like it is a bit of a gray space, but I've left it that way to give you more opportunity rather than to limit you. So a couple more quick things I'm going to just mention since I don't see anybody with their hands up. There's no minimum acreage needed to apply for this grant, but make it realistic. People are still going to be scoring it. We don't have a minimum acreage. We have a minimum amount. So if you ask for $10,000 and you're doing, you know, 2 acres, you got to make a good case why that's necessary. Why do we need to spend that much money? If you're asking for 200,000 and you're only treating 10 acres, I'd need a real good reason why we're going to be giving you that much money. But I'm not going to limit you and say that you can't ask for that, you know, so you need to make your case. It's all about how you write your grant. Everybody gets tired of me saying that, but it really comes down to that. Make a case, make it clear, make it concise, and help our scorers understand better why it's important. Okay. So, well, Nathan jumped in there. What's up, Nathan?
One quick question about treatment priorities. I know that ODF likes hand piling and burning and underburning, but in Southwest Oregon, it's really hard to pull that off with the weather we've got and the permitting requirements. Is there a drop-off if I'm calling for chipping mastication versus hand pile burning? Is there a scoring drop-off there?
I think you would actually probably score better without hand piling and burning. We are leaning into a climate change kind of space where we want to be thinking outside the box. And one of the questions I believe addresses, you know, climate smart practices as far as like, you know, utilization of forest products and stuff, but that would be a good space to talk about what you want to do with the debris or whatever that's going to be coming out of the mitigation work. And if you can think of things outside the box that are not hand piling, burning, such, I am on board for that. And so are our scorers. So doesn't mean that if you have to burn out there, you have to burn out there. You're not going to get dinged on it. But the more you can think outside of the box to be more on board with climate smart practices, the more I support that, because I think we need to be cognizant of that with this kind of funding. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great. Let's see here. Somebody said they already submitted their application, but did not receive verification that was received. I will track that down today. I actually was trying to jump in and see what applications have been put in. So I'll get in there and see. Also, maybe we need to select something to send back verification. But anybody who's put it in so far, I can let you know. How much of the grant is left to be allocated? Well, we haven't allocated any of the money yet. This is the application process. So at this point in time, that we have $2.5 million and a whole bunch of people who are going to be turning in stuff before November 24th. And so that's when this is closed. And then we'll take a look at what we got and identify that from there. The scoring will go through each of the applications. And once they've been scored, we'll identify how many of them we can fund. And each of the applications will be scored by 3 different scorers so that we have an average. And I use a rank system rather than a scoring system in order to maintain a level of equity between the different scorers. Like if you have a scorer who scores too easy or too hard, the ranking system takes away the lowness of certain scores because it ranks them based on, you know, first, second, third, or whatever of that particular score. And that allows us the autonomy to give more equitable outcomes to these kind of scoring processes. And it's also something that our federal partners utilize when they do their scoring. So we're trying to stay consistent with that, even though this is state funding. Remember that the application does not save. Just want to throw that out there again. I've had some people say, you know, hey, I put it in there and then I lost it. I just want to remind you the application itself does not save. Please use like Word or something of that nature. You're putting your, you know, all of your answers into first. And if you need others to review it, that you're sending it that way. And then go ahead and when you're ready to submit is when you're going to fill out the application. I know that it's clunky. I'm not super excited about the fact that Survey 123 makes it difficult in this way. Hopefully in the future, we'll be able to make it a little bit more smooth. However, this is what we're working with. And I just want to keep telling people that we need to make sure that you're not like trying to save it onto the website. It's not going to work. If you applied previously and would like access to your previous application, please let me know as I have these on file and I can send them to you. Some of you guys applied in the last couple of bienniums and maybe you want to take a look at what you said, or maybe you want to review it, or you know, whatever it may be. I do have those and I can send them to you. So just make sure you give me a shout out. Can you submit more than one application? Yes, but it cannot be on the same geographical location for the same work. So be careful with that a little bit. If you're going to put in more than one application, it needs to be totally separate projects in separate spaces. So, and I wouldn't, if you can keep it from being segmented, probably you'll do better with the scoring. Just kind of heads up. But I didn't put a limitation on how many times you can apply. And that's partly because we have sponsors sometimes, right? And so we have like ODF might put in 3 different applications on behalf of totally different communities, totally different, you know, situations. So a water conservation district might get multiple people wanting it, but it doesn't make sense to put them all into one grant, right? So as an HOA, maybe that happens too for some reason, you know, that I don't know exactly why that might happen, but definitely you can put in more than one application. It does not have to just be one, but if you're doing the same work in the same area and trying to increase your chances, I will catch you. So go ahead, Nathan.
Along those lines, I know that there's going to be a lot of applications coming out of Southwest Oregon. Is it all going to be merit-based, or is there going to be some effort to spread the funding around the state to make sure that, like, I guess, like, if there's a lot of good applications coming out of one area, are they disincentivized to all be funded because you don't want to put funding into one geographical area over the other ones, or is that not a consideration?
Yeah, great question. It will all be done by the scorers. So it's not going to be looking at like, oh, this area has too many grants or something, or too many applications. Nothing like that will be looked at. I might notice it when I look at like the map or something, but that's not going to be anything that's taken into account with the scoring pieces. If you write a good grant and it makes sense and it's important and you've really explained the why, you're going to score well, and then you would get the funding. There's nothing to do with the too much or too little in different areas. And usually it's about how well you write your grant. So I wouldn't even say that you could get 20 different applications in one area, but nobody's good at writing the grant. They may not get any funding. I hate to say that it's that way, but really it's like, how well do you articulate why your program or your project is important? Okay. I'm checking the chat. And then also, I think that was it for all of the things I wanted to make sure I covered that just came up for questions that I thought I should clarify to the group. And Richard, I do see your email, or I see your message here about an email, and I'll see if I can connect with you. I don't know if I'll have time today, but tomorrow I would. But we'll connect offline. Any other questions that I did not cover here, or even that were maybe in the chat that I might have missed from this group? Okay. So I'm not hearing any. Hopefully, oh, wait, there's one. Mary says,
I have
are these,
one question.
is Mary talking or is that somebody else?
This is Susan.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear
Go
me?
ahead. Go ahead, Susan, and then I'll answer Mary's question here real quick.
Okay, thank you. We spoke previously. Could you clarify again the application and the sponsor? When we spoke, you mentioned that the application, the person who's the applicant will receive all of the correspondence regarding this, and the funding will go to that person. Is that correct? Or does the funding go to the sponsor?
Good question. The answer is maybe. So if you get the funding and you're set up with a sponsor, we'll have the conversation around how do we want to communicate and who is going to be taking on the financial responsibility of the grant as far as reimbursement, invoicing, and so forth goes. Sometimes people use sponsors for that purpose, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the sponsor is just a technical expertise or something of that nature that's going to be part of the grant. So it really just depends on your specific situation, and we would discuss that after the funding's identified. But you do want to list the sponsor if you have one, because it will be important that they're included in that conversation if you get the funding, and it helps the scores have a full understanding of who's going to be kind of managing the grant. Does that answer it? Okay. And then Mary said, are these grants available every year? These are on a biennium basis, so it's every 2 years. So we were a little bit delayed this year in realizing if we got the funding, there was a lot going on. So it came in June of 2025. So the next opportunity would be in June of 2027. And it goes in a biennium structure of every 2 years if we get the funding continued. So there's always an option that they don't continue the funding into the future, and that can happen. But so far, we've been lucky for the last 4 years and into this 6-year mark here for this next biennium here. And Lori, great. Thank you for adding that in. She put some context around the funding background of Senate Bill 762 and exactly how kind of this got started. Appreciate that. And then Cheryl's got a hand up.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's a question on the application about whether you were funded in the 23-25 biennium.
I believe I have one in there because it's based off of, but you're right. I think there, I have to look at it now. I just can't remember if we put it in there. I believe we did. There should be one in there. Not necessarily about if you were funded in the biennium, but if you were funded previously. But you know what? I apologize, but I don't think I put it in here because I'm going to be checking all of them. That's what it was. I remember what I decided to do. So every application that comes in, I will be verifying whether or not you had a previous grant with us through the Small Forest Land Grant, if you were funded or not, and if you met deliverables. And the reason why I left it off of there was because I have to do research on each one of the grants to verify that information. And I didn't think it would be useful just to have the question on the application. So thank you for reminding me. I apologize. I can't remember what I did on that one, but yeah, it's not in there, but I will be checking each and every application because it is one of the pieces that's part of the scoring.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, we're just about at time. I got 2 minutes here. Any last takers, or if you guys feel good about it or you need to talk to me offline, please feel free. And hopefully you guys have some good applications coming in. I'm excited to see what you come up with. And this is one of my favorite parts of the job, is just being able to connect with you guys and being able to see kind of all the fun ideas you come up with and the work you want to do to help protect your communities and your lands. And it's just really awesome to be able to get all this out onto actual actionable pieces on the ground. So 100% support you, appreciate you. And yeah, let's move forward together. So give me a holler if you need anything. Thank you guys so much.